All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to October 1st's MakerDAO community call. We do these community calls every week, every Tuesday. We've been pretty consistent for the last couple of years doing this. So it's really exciting anytime we have like guests on and et cetera, et cetera. But today we don't have a guest. I've been trying to line up the LS Dai guys, but they're going to be coming on, I think, on the week of the 22nd. So in a few weeks, and they have some exciting stuff coming out, which is why I'm scheduling them far out in the future. But in this community call, we typically go through all things that are going on in the MakerDAO universe. Increasingly, that's been definitely a lot of governance stuff. We go over technical milestones, new partnerships, interesting videos that have come out, just posts from the Maker blog. We also highlight stuff in the community, which is not restricted to like really interesting articles and thought pieces, developer creations, pretty much everything you could think of. We want to mention here in like a nice little 1 hour, sub 1 hour roundup of the stuff that's been going on in the Maker universe, and quite frankly, every week there's quite a lot going on, and it's been really awesome to just be part of this call, and I'm happy for you guys that follow along. So without further ado, I'm gonna launch into some of the governance stuff. So in the last few months, we've put governance up top because there's just so much that is so essential to MakerDAO that has to do with governance because we are a DAO, right? And we have on-chain governance, and we have a whole community of people that are discussing and figuring out, the right answers or basically the best decisions to a whole litany of matters in regards to MakerDAO, and so this week, we had seen an executive vote. It came out on Friday, the 27th, and it was to lower the stability fee to 10.5%. That passed on the 29th with about 45,000 MKR. So CDP owners are enjoying another stability fee decrease down to 10.5%. There was a governance poll that launched on Monday, the 30th. Oh God, I feel a sneeze. Okay, it's gone. All right, so on September 30th, on Monday, we came out with a stability fee adjustment poll like we do every Monday. And right now, it's open until Thursday, and MKR token holders have the chance to vote on a linear scale between 6.5% to 14.5%, whether they want to lower or raise the stability fee. Besides those two kind of standard things, because we see stability fee adjustments almost every week, or at least they're pulled for every week in MakerDAO. Besides that, we do have some extra governance stuff happening on the governance poll side of things. And if you're unfamiliar with like the difference between executive votes and governance polls, really simply put, governance polls just kind of measure soft sentiment in the community, and specifically from MKR token holders, whereas executive votes are actually the votes that execute changes to like the state of the system. So if we were to actually change the stability fee, it would have to go through an executive vote, not a governance poll. So the governance polls are used mainly to kind of precede an executive proposal and also to vote on kind of the meta governance processes, roles, and ideas that governance is putting out. And so right now we have a set of governance proposals around oracles. And if you've been following along on the governance and risk calls, there is a ton going on with oracles. So for one, there are going to be, because the Maker protocol is becoming decentralized over time. Eventually the foundation actually has to give over the keys of managing the oracles to the DAO. And so right now we are ratifying a mandate for basically the very early level specs for what managing Oracle teams will look like. And an Oracle team is basically the set of developers or teams that are working on both maintaining the oracles, upgrading the oracles, doing development work on the oracles, and then eventually are going to be doing business development around the oracles, mainly around the new whitelisting and the new, basically the new whitelisting functionality that Oracle's V2 will have. And so there's three main proposals. Actually, yeah, there were supposed to be four, I think, but yeah, three main proposals, which is the main interim Oracle team mandate, the Oracle's incentives restructuring, which is just a proposal about the fact that there will be a whitelist and that uh, actually being able to call data out of Maker Oracles will eventually be a service that people will have to pay for if they want that data or if they want to use that data in their smart contracts. At the moment, single collateral DAI oracles are free to pull from, but in V2 they will not be. Then there's another proposal that has to do with that called the Responsible Oracle Migration Proposal, and that is basically saying that for the first year of multi-collateral DAI, no matter what, the oracles are free for everybody for a year. And actually, the reason for this is super practical. It's the fact that a ton of projects actually rely on Maker oracles, and we don't actually know how many. And so, if all of a sudden they had to pay for Oracle data, uh, that might cut off a lot of smaller projects at the knees. So we want to give people a reasonable sort of runway to transition into this new model of oracles as a service, basically. So the responsible Oracle migration proposal will just propose that for the first year after MCD launch, people can get that data for free and use that data for free. I think that's it. I'll have a little bit more details on the Oracle proposals next week if you guys are interested in diving a little bit deeper into it. I definitely suggest checking out, I think is episode 52 and 51 of the governance and risk meetings. Those summaries are there, the videos are there. Hell, the SoundCloud audio is there for those meetings. So if you go and check them out, you'll find a couple episodes where Nick dives into the Oracle proposals, and they're really interesting episodes. And if you do have any questions uh, or disagreements or anything, there's forum threads. There's a ton of places where you can actually come and jump into the conversation. So uh, all in all, though, it's a really uh, well structured proposal, and I think the general sentiment in the community is pretty positive about it. I haven't seen any major disagreement with it besides the kind of probing around the implementation of the whitelist and how a lot of things will actually work in Oracle's V2. So things are looking pretty promising on these proposals. Uh, in other news around governance, we had the community poll for changing the linear rate stepping model to an exponential rate stepping model. And what this means is that every week when we do a stability fee adjustment poll, the options are, -1, -2, -3, or +1, +2, +3%, where now it's going to be on an exponential curve rather than a linear curve. So the options will rather be add 25 basis points, add 50 basis points, add a percentage point, add 2 percentage point, add 4 percentage points. So it's a little bit uh, more flexible in terms of the options it gives MKR token holders for how they want to adjust the stability fee. They could adjust it very granularly, maybe 25 basis points, 50 basis points. And they can also, in times of emergencies where they feel the need to make bigger changes, can vote on 2% and 4%, which are already in existence in the linear model. So it doesn't actually change anything except give maker holders a more granular, kind of comfortable set of options, in my opinion. So that passed. So that's no longer up. That was a 7-day poll, and it passed with 99.9%. I think only 20 MKR of the 18,000 MKR or something voted against it. So that's about it for all the actual polls that are going on. If you are interested in governance, definitely check out this thread called Governance at a Glance. We have a bunch of community members. One of them, Long for Wisdom, is uh, a total saint. He puts together this thread, Governance at a Glance. It has like a 3 point 1 week summary of like what's going on in governance, a bit about Vishesh's analysis on the Dai markets, and then all of the relevant threads. So you can jump in wherever your heart desires, and certainly don't feel like you have to be everywhere all at once. Make governance at Maker is very, very much so you know, the threads should attract the people that know the most about those matters, right? Or have the strongest opinions, or are able to intellectually navigate around these, conversations that we're having. And so we always want the best and most cohesive kind of participation in those threads. So don't feel like you got to be everywhere, but certainly that governance at a glance thread is a great source of information. All right, cool. So this week we've seen a couple of threads in governance also kind of get a lot of attention. So Rune put up a "What's the point of adding stablecoins as collateral?" thread, and also engaged in a lot of Twitter conversations around the topic of adding centralized stablecoins, and it kind of spread into the whole idea of using restricted and centralized collateral in general in MakerDAO. And this conversation is actually ongoing. And so a lot of people seem to disagree with the approach of including centralized asset types, claiming it's going to kill MakerDAO's differentiation from the competition, and that it just introduces a ton of like this backdoor risk. Uh, uh, and so, yeah, the conversation is ongoing. I'm not going to comment on it because I actually think that having centralized asset types is a good thing and probably necessary for MakerDAO, and it doesn't actually. Yeah, well, there's
That is
yeah,
commenting on it, just so you know.
that is commenting on it. Damn it. Yeah, you're right. Well, just as a community member too, I am employed by the foundation, and my views are totally my own. But as a community member, it's just been totally fascinating watching this conversation, because all of the points that I was gonna make were made, and so I think that I think it's a good conversation to have. And I think it's, Cyrus mentioned on the governance and risk call on Thursday that he thinks that once the first real governance cycle in multi collateral Dai happens, where we re add ETH as a collateral the appropriate way, right? Like, and then we start adding maybe the first one or two additional collateral types. People will begin to see the nuance and the absolute stunning level of attention to detail that risk assessment does on these assets, and yeah, people will learn over time kind of the safeguards in place in MakerDAO that actually make things a lot less risky than you might think when dealing with like centralized asset types. But either way, enough comments from me. Really good thread. Check it out. And as a result of that thread, actually, Rune came out with another thread called a proposal for Purity Dai. And Purity Dai was basically like a different version of Dai, also created out of the Maker protocol, and it would be solely backed by ETH. And the one kind of economic logical drawback to this would be that the supply would be pretty limited. There's no guarantee that you'd be able to effectively peg it to $1. Well, maybe you can. And also that naturally, because the supply is limited, the DSR rate would be a lot smaller than like the regular Dai that would incorporate the full scope of the underlying collateral portfolio. But yeah, nevertheless, really interesting whole domain of conversation going on this week around that. Uh, there was also a thread on updating. Sorry, it was a thread called "An Update on DSR and Initial Values." And so Cyrus and the interim risk team have been doing a ton of work trying to understand the ideal case for how to launch DSR with multi-collateral Dai, whether it should be at 0% or some low percent to begin with, and all the kind of economic risks and nuances that go with each kind of scenario. And so if you're interested in that, definitely take a look and read. One interesting suggestion from the thread was the idea to actually apply sort of a DSR modifier. Well, okay, before I actually get into that, maybe I can explain it a little bit, but somebody has to pay for DSR, right? And the initial idea was that, okay, the stability fee is comprised of the risk premium, which goes into the actual fundamental risk of the asset you're using in the CDP, and charges appropriately for it to cover any expected losses in the equation. And then on top of that, you add kind of a DSR fee. So CDP users are paying for the DSR. Uh, but the problem is, how do you apply this rate? How do you apply this DSR modifier? Uh, because some collateral types will be a lot smaller than others. Some will command like very low stability fees because they're very kind of safe collateral types, right? And like imagine having some sort of counterparty risk reduced version of a US Treasury. Like that's not gonna you're not gonna be able to charge 10% for that, right? Or you won't want to, and you'll be priced out by other people. So like it's a real kind of puzzle on how to charge DSR across different CDP types, where you don't price out the low risk collateral type CDPs, and then at the same time, you kind of want to make sure that the way that DSR is paid across or the way DSR is paid by all these different CDP types is actually, somewhat fair, because you don't want does it make sense for the more risky CDP, or sorry, the less risky CDP to subsidize the more risky CDP? Like there's all these kind of questions, and so it's been a really interesting topic of conversation. Definitely check out the thread. And then the last thing from the governance forums that I'm going to mention is there was a signal request thread about whether we should increase the single collateral Dai debt ceiling. And it's so funny because every time Matthew brings this up, he's usually the one to uh, re-engage with this topic. Every time he brings it up, sort of something happens, and the Dai supply just comes crashing down because of like ETH market movements or whatever. But nevertheless, right now we have a poll going on in the forum, so you don't have to be a Maker token holder. You just have to be a participant in the community, uh, and we're polling for whether we should actually uh, begin a governance poll for increasing the single collateral Dai debt ceiling. And there's some interesting comments from Cyrus from the governance and risk call towards the end of it in the post call discussion on Thursday about it. But nevertheless, it's not an extremely pressing issue. Uh, the current debt ceiling is 100 million. We're at about 81 million Dai. Uh, and I think the winning option is that we raise it by 20 million to 120 million total, in kind of a one decision vote that doesn't carry any regular cadence with it. There were other options that carried like a 10 mil increase with like a 2 week uh, reevaluation or something like that. So yeah, that's what's going on in governance. As for like partnerships, integrations, grants, we saw a couple of them this week. Ternio Block Card integrates Dai. I think they're another like Visa powered crypto debit card. Then Low Coins has integrated Dai into its core service. So Low Coins is kind of like a local Bitcoins, local Ethereum type of website, and it's used mainly, if I'm not mistaken, in South America, but I could be wrong about that. Either way, Low Coins integrated Dai, which is pretty good, and it's becoming standard. Like if you're dealing with crypto, you definitely want to deal with stable coins as well. Uh, yeah. All right. So from the Maker blog, a couple things. We announced our update on the new Oasis. So in the last year, we went from having like the old Oasis to releasing Oasis.direct, which was like a very like Kyber swappy, Uniswappy type front end. And then we disabled all of the Oasis stuff in anticipation of a rebranding and a relaunch of like our Oasis front ends. And we kind of in the interim launched ETH to Dai. So ETH to Dai is a DEX that only has Ethereum and Dai pairs. And so today, or sorry, not today, but a couple days ago, maybe was it yesterday, the 26th? Sorry, not a, yeah, that was on Thursday. Yeah, cool. So on Thursday, we announced the update on the new Oasis. So there's going to be something called Oasis Trade coming out, and it's basically going to be the Oasis that's going to facilitate a bunch of markets for any collateral, any assets uh, that are used on the Maker protocol. Also from the Maker blog this week, we came out with a new edition of Making Maker. So we come out with a blog post every month, basically giving a rough kind of bird's eye view of the things that we've been up to in the organization and the things that have happened in our community around Maker. So check that out. And that's about it from the blog. Now I'm gonna launch into some highlights from the community, but before I do, I'm just gonna give a pause here and uh, invite you guys to ask any questions. Happy to go back and like talk about anything in specific. Uh, yeah, we're not in too big of a rush this meeting.
I'm wondering if like, are we measuring forum activity? Like, is there anybody measuring, like, is it going up? Is it going down? Is it staying the same?
I think those metrics are there. I don't know if anybody's really. Let me actually take a look. I don't know if anybody's actually like day to day or even week to week like really looking at it. I know just from like my general feeling. Like I was like I think one of the first signups on this forum since we launched it, and like week to week, I feel like we've been having a lot more people. So like a lot more new accounts have come on, and like just everybody doesn't post a lot but posts in their, kind of domain of uh, competence, right? But I feel like we have a good amount of people on the forum. I'm trying to see if I could find some stats on my side. So cool. So I guess the last 7 days, 5 topics created. Last 30 days, 32 topics created. The all time 139 topics created. Posts, last 7 days, 54 posts. Last 30 days, 511 posts. All time 253. Yeah. Active users for the last 7 days has been 91. For the last 30 days has been 183. Cool.
Do you guys have any sense of like what drives more people into the forum? Like like did
Like
Rune's
where people are saying
recent, like, did those conversations drive more people into the forum, or do they come from the blog posts that you do or from other things?
That's a good question. Let me actually see. I think that on individual posts you could see like the viewership of the post. So like for example, governance at a glance is sitting at and it was created on July 7th. So since July 7th it's had 912 views, yada yada yada. All right, so that's irrelevant then. Let's see like a more recent post like Runes. Where's Runes things? Here, oh no. Purity Dai, there it is, and adding stablecoins. So the initial post, what's the point of adding stablecoins as collateral? That saw 821 views since 17 days ago, with 41 replies and 13 unique users replying. 38 likes, three links. All right, and then Purity Dai, which was the post he came out with about a week later, has seen 338 views, 16 replies across 8 different people. So yeah, and then like maybe to benchmark that against some other more nominal thread post, like should we change the stability fee poll cadence, for example? This post, let's see actually when it was posted. 22 days ago compared to Rune's post 17 days ago, and that saw 320 views uh across 13 different replies, 9 different users. Yeah, so I think that people were definitely drawn to the forum as a result of Rune's positing the question about stablecoins as collateral, and I definitely see a bunch of like new accounts with first posts on that thread as well. So, yeah,
Makes sense. I imagine the more controversial stuff is going to drive forum
always,
signups. Yeah.
always that's like that's like the internet 101, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, but I don't think anybody's uh monitoring the activity too closely. Uh, yeah, maybe it would be good to do that. All right, cool. So I'm gonna launch into some highlights from the community then. So actually from our own team, maybe this should be in a different section, but maybe from our own team, we came out with another developer guide called Intro to the Oasis Dex Protocol. It is labeled a beginner level developer guide. You can get through it in about an hour. And it's based on the Kovan deployed Maker OTC contract, and the guide can be used with the mainnet deployment of Oasis DEX. Uh, by the way, Maker OTC is Oasis. So yeah, so that came out. We also saw some metrics posted by Cole Kennelly from Coinmetrics. He's not from Coinmetrics. He just posted stats from Coinmetrics, basically highlighting the fact that the 60-day volatility of Dai is at an all-time low, which I actually thought was really interesting, considering the fact that in our community we've been, trying hard to get Dai at $1. So although the volatility's been low, meaning like the variation in price in general has been low, uh, Dai has been trading pretty steadily, slightly above $1 for about the last month and a half to 2 months. So really interesting kind of metric there, posted by Cole. Uh, we also came out with a referral bounty this week. So actually put this up on bounties.network, but if you were not aware, I'm making you aware. But at MakerDAO, we have a meetup grants program, where basically it caters to new organizers, people who are just passionate about the space, who want to do something, in real life as opposed to on the internet, who want to put together a little networking event, a little educational event, a meetup. But we are offering not only a micro granting program where you can actually submit an application, uh, pretty short, I think it's like 10, 15 questions, uh, request funding in Dai for your event. We help fund your event. And then on top of that, we have just a bunch of preliminary guides if you're a new organizer. So if you don't know how to do meetups, and you're interested in how to make a budget, we have a guide for that. If you're interested in how to promote your meetup, we have like a guide for that. And all of this is kind of community resources. So if you're interested in contributing to those guides, you can actually go on our GitHub, submit a PR, or just hit me up, and I'm happy to work with you to make those guides better. But the main point is we came out with a referral program. So if you know anybody, who's your friend, who you think is interested in hosting a meetup, we're really interested in getting to reach those people. So if you refer them to the meetup grants program and they apply for a grant and they host the meetup successfully, you get an easy 25 Dai. So yeah, pretty easy way to make 25 Dai. Just refer your friend. All they got to do is put your name in like the last little question of the initial application form. And yeah, that's 25 tickets to pool together. Just saying. Uh, but regardless, that's out. I'm gonna post it on my Twitter, and I'm gonna try to get MakerDAO Twitter to post it as well throughout the next couple months. But it's just a little thing we're testing. But yeah, we're interested in funding people's real life events and kickstarting kind of communities in places where they wouldn't be there. Or maybe that's not the wrong way to say it, but we're interested in getting local communities to come together around the topic of DeFi, open finance, Dai, MakerDAO, like all these kind of decentralized financial primitives and things that are going on. So yeah,
Hey David,
we're
are you
yeah.
guys do you guys have any way to help people get the word out if they create a meetup?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you do create a meetup, I'm happy to mention it on this call. I'm happy to retweet it if you send it my way beforehand. Uh, but did you have anything in mind? Is there anything we can do in your mind, Chris,
Um,
that would be good for that?
well, Twitter is one thing, and I guess eventually having a web page or something, where it's just listing all the different meetup activity. I guess once you get a bunch going, that would make more sense.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, that would be pretty cool. Cool. Yeah. So in general, if you want to get the word out about your meetup, just hit me up. I'm happy to retweet it. Happy to try to nudge Coulter into retweeting it on the main MakerDAO page. But that's less of a guarantee than me personally retweeting it. But I got you. If you want me to do that. But regardless, the main big blockers for people hosting meetups is usually the expense, and also kind of the intimidation factor of like, oh, it's my first time, never done this before. It's like a lot of stress. It's a lot of like moving parts, and it's less intimidating than it seems. So we with our meetup grants program, we try to like alleviate that. But yeah, we're definitely for uh, helping you promote it as best as we can. And also, I've done this before, but I've teleconferenced into meetups. I've presented a couple times. We're happy to get a team member, or if you're interested in having somebody speak, we could definitely try to get somebody from our team to do that, whether it's me, whether it's somebody more technical, if you're having a super technical meetup. uh, we love participating in these things as much as we can. Granted, our plates are uh, overflowing with shit to do, but regardless, we still really enjoy our participating in real life meetups. So yeah, reach out to us about that. We're happy to help. Uh, Other things we've seen in the Maker universe and DeFi universe in general, we saw Consensus come out with this thing called the DeFi score. So introducing the DeFi score, an open source methodology to evaluate code and financial risk in DeFi lending. And I think this is a really great initiative because to the end user, a lot of these platforms seem the same in terms of like risk, or like, they just see a UI and a deposit button and a rate. Like that's the only thing going in the user's mind. But having more signal around the actual technical risk behind any given protocol uh, is really important for the end user. And I think that uh, in in our community in DeFi, we should be really cognizant of the fact that we should educate our end users about these risks, because they are important and they are not irrelevant. They are very relevant. Kudos to Consensus for putting out this thing called the DeFi score. I haven't actually looked into their methodology very much, so uh, I'm personally not endorsing it. I'm just saying it's pretty cool. Cool. So developer creations. Uh, you actually, I don't know if they announced it on Twitter or not, but I saw they announced it on Telegram, and I also kind of stumbled across it by accident. But Santiment, who created a MakerDAO analytics dashboard, actually revamped their analytics dashboard. So you could check that out at graphs.santiment .net/MakerDAO. Uh, and also, we'll just use this opportunity to post. Oh shit, this is not the right link. Good thing I didn't post that. This is the right link, but here's the agenda if you're in the call and you're following along. I've linked everything I'm talking about, and right now I'm in the highlights from the community section. And if you're interested in checking out Sentiment's MakerDAO dashboard and its new facelift, uh, just click on the link in there, and you could see it. But it is really pretty. Maxime and his team did a great job. For developer creations, that's about it. There's a few articles that came out and a few videos. I'm gonna go through the articles first. There was one called "Arbitrage: Get Real-Time Lending Rates from DeFi Platforms," and the end of the title should be on Google Sheets. So Audrey Charmant put out a really kind of comprehensive Medium piece on how to get real-time lending rates on your Google spreadsheet. So check that out if you're interested. I found it very helpful. Uh, Another article that came out this week was taking under collateralized loans for fun and for profit. And so this was actually Sam's son, uh, pretty famous white hat dude, and he discovered attacks on BZX, which is Fulcrum, and on what was the other one? On BZX and on DDEX, basically exploiting their uh, their use of oracles, or at least how they actually source like prices for their collateral assets, especially on BZX, uh, in a way that, how do you manipulate this price and borrow way more than your collateral is actually work. So like he demonstrated three different attacks, and obviously this is already after they were patched, so this this article is really just a learning experience, but uh, he ran through granularly each of the attacks uh, and how they would turn a profit, and it was kind of amazing. Uh, the key takeaways of that article, I'll just list them off because I think they're very important for people building in the space. Is that you should you should one, don't use an on-chain decentralized oracle without some sort of validation. So due to the nature of on-chain decentralized oracles, ensure that you're validating the rate being returned, whether it's by taking the order, comparing the rate against known good rates, or comparing the rate in both directions. So pay mind to your oracles, ladies and gentlemen. They are very important. Anyway, moving forward. There was another article called DeFi in the Real World, a trust issue, scaling open finance beyond crypto. And in this piece, I think it was by Centrifuge, or one of the guys at Centrifuge. What's his name? Let me give credit. Lucas Volgasang. So he put out this piece, and he basically argued for the inclusion of real world assets, and his argument was pretty much the same argument that I kind of think has the most merit, and it's that centralized assets also have an expected loss, or I forget the metric he said, but uh, actually, oh yeah, I highlighted the exact couple sentences that I wanted to reference. So, quote out of, oh no, that's not a quote out of that article. That's a quote out of a different article. Oh, see, I'm mixing things up. Actually, both of these are all right. I see where my mistake is. So in the article I just referenced, by Lucas, uh, he has the same thesis as the other article that I have listed called "Black Swans, Trusted Assets, and Multi-Collateral Dai." And the thesis is basically that centralized or not centralized assets, you could look at them in terms of risk, and you could measure that, and you could plan for it. Everything has risk, whether it's centralized or decentralized, and it's just a matter of tuning the parameters appropriately, right? Which I think is a really powerful stance to take in the argument for centralized assets. But anyway, yeah, moving forward. So definitely dive into those articles if you're interested in those topics. Uh, we saw a bunch of really great videos this week. So one of them actually was by uh, one of our very own Chris Bleck. He put out a video, part of the Dai Beginner series called Five Ways to Get the Dai Stablecoin. Uh, and the series is meant to aim at like the newest users of DeFi, people who are just getting into it. Uh, and yeah, how do you get Dai? That's like one of the first questions people might ask themselves when they're like loading up their Coinbase wallet or loading up MetaMask or something like that. Uh, so yeah, super fundamental video. Another video that I watched this week was a presentation about Oasis Dex, the past, the present, the future, and its role in the DeFi ecosystem by our very own Bartek. Bartek is an absolute god. This guy is amazing. You should definitely watch that video. It gives you a lot of appreciation for the nuance in the data around Oasis Dex, around Dexes in general, and around DeFi in general. And also, he highlights the total misrepresentation of data by data aggregators like CoinMarketCap and others who really don't accurately parse, volumes accurately across all these different, not only centralized exchanges but decentralized exchanges. So check that out. It's a really, really great dive into the history of Oasis Dex, the current state of Oasis Dex, where it's going, and a snapshot of like the kind of volume that Oasis Dex is actually seeing. Uh, so yeah, and then the last video slash podcast that I want to mention is David Hoffman's POV Crypto. So for episode 81, we had they had Kenny Rowe on, and he talked about MakerDAO versus the Maker Foundation and other DAO related topics. And so Kenny did an absolute stunning job in that podcast. I watched it with my breakfast this morning, so definitely check that out if you're interested in DAOs and how Maker at least has been kind of trying to navigate the differentiation between the Maker Foundation and MakerDAO, because this is something at the foundation that we're very mindful of, and we're trying to tune our communications around to reflect the reality that the foundation is very much there to bootstrap the DAO, and that MakerDAO lives is meant to live on its own, and slowly but surely, more and more uh, is being let out into the wild, right? Cool. So that's about it for some highlights from the community. Uh, the last section in today's call is going to be about real life events, but before I go into that, I'm just going to pause for a few seconds, let you guys speak up if you guys want to talk about anything that I've mentioned. All right, cool. So, oh, did I hear something?
No, I was going to say, how come Chris not saying anything?
Oh, do you want Chris to say something?
What would you
Well,
like me to say?
yeah. Oh, maybe a sneak peek into the next Dai related video that you're doing.
The
Any
next
any
one for beginners is going to be about how to use Dai. So the idea
Okay,
was like, how do I get Dai? How do I use Dai? I'm going to also do a voting demo. So like a
nice.
really basic for MKR holders, how do you vote? How do you actually do it? How do you start a voting contract and really break it down into like bite-sized pieces for total beginners?
Right on, right on.
That's what's coming.
I like it. I like it. I think those are super important. Uh, and it's really great that you're doing them. Awesome.
Thank you.
Uh, cool. So moving forward then, some real life events. All right, we are gonna be heavy in Japan this week, but there are some other events as well. So on October 2nd, tomorrow in Tokyo, we have a couple of events. One is called Be Tokyo 2019, where Rune is going to be speaking, and then there's another more generically named DeFi meetup where Gustav Arentoft is going to be speaking, and then on Thursday, in just a couple days here in New York, uh, there's going to be an event called DeFi NYC Mini Demo Day, uh, and it's going to include MakerDAO, Staked, Uniswap, Terminal, and UMA. And for representing MakerDAO is yours truly. So I'm going to be doing a little presentation on the current state of MakerDAO and where it's heading. So definitely excited to meet some of you guys if you will be there. Uh, on the 5th of October, which is I think what is it, Saturday? Yeah, so on Saturday in Tokyo we have a meetup we're participating in called Node Tokyo Day 201. Link is going to be over there, so check it out. And by the way, all of these that I'm naming are linked in the agenda. So if you're watching on YouTube, uh, the link is below in the description, so you could just click on in there, navigate to the October 1st little section, and you could see the real life events there. So if you're looking for the event pages, they're there. So also on the 5th, on Saturday in India, we're not going to have any physical presence there, but we are sponsoring and will hopefully be participating, I guess, online with the Game Oasis Hackathon. So I think it's us, Kyber, and a bunch of other people are sponsoring this hackathon basically around blockchain gaming. So uh, check that out if you are around India on the 5th. On October 7th in Osaka, and this is where all the Osaka stuff starts rolling. Uh, I guess for context, October 8th through 11th is DevCon, which is like one of the larger developer conferences uh, in the world. I don't know if that's true, uh, but it's a really, really awesome big conference, and a ton of people from the crypto world are there. And so there's a ton of events going on that week, before and after. So on the 7th, we have three events. There's the Yukio conference, which I know nothing about. Kathleen will be there. Also, we have the Daisuki meetup, which is an event that is actually up on kickback.com. And if you don't know about kickback.com, it's kind of like an Eventbrite type website, but you can also stake crypto on your attendance. I think you have the option of staking ETH or DAI. The event organizer can decide on that. And right now, if you want to come to Daisuki meetup, you have to stake 10 Dai. And if you don't show, then you lose your 10 Dai. And the people that came actually take your 10 Dai. So, yeah, if you feel like subsidizing people's transaction costs, definitely sign up and don't come. I welcome that. So, and the very last event on the 7th is the Crypto Wars tournament at DevCon 5. So, Crypto Wars, I think it's by Experimental Gaming. They've been doing tournaments basically for like the last 6 months nonstop for like little prize amounts, 500, 250 Dai, things like that. And if you've ever played the game, if you're a video game enthusiast, definitely check it out. I played it for a bit, but unfortunately don't have too much time to play it more, which is fine. So yeah, check it out if you are in Osaka on the 7th. Maybe get a chance to win some extra Dai, some extra pull together tickets. Wink. Oh, okay, cool. And that's about it for the next 7 days of events. I think there's some stuff going on after the 11th, which I'm sure on our Twitter we're going to be posting all about the events that we're going to be involved with around Osaka, Japan for DevCon. So stay tuned for that. And also just a bit of housekeeping. So next week on Tuesday, it's unclear whether the community call is going to be happening at the same time, if at all. Uh, Everybody is going to be in Japan, and Tuesday the 8th is actually the first day of DevCon. So it's very possible that next week might be a week off, probably the first in the last like 5 or 6 months. Uh, tear down my eye, but it's okay. There's also a chance that I might be like masochistic and just host this thing at like an ungodly hour, but like we're gonna try to avoid that. We're gonna try to like prioritize personal health, and I think we can go a week without a community call. It's not that big of a deal. So anyway, yeah, that's to be determined. I think in the next day or two, I will really solidify on this and decide whether or not we're gonna do it. Probably just gonna skip it, but either way, just thought I'd let you guys know. And so that is it for the call with 10 minutes to spare. So I'm happy to like open things up, and maybe even for the next 10 minutes, I could dig into some of the Oracle proposals. Or Chris, if you want, we could talk about something semi-controversial.
Oh, I don't know if we have enough time.
I know 10 minutes is hard, man. I don't know if people on Twitter could do it in like 180 characters or less. I feel like we could do it in 10 minutes or less. I'm playing. Uh,
Yeah, it was funny because before you mentioned you were talking about that, and then you're talking about the forum signups, and then you mentioned that you wanted the sort of most thoughtful, the most thoughtful responses in the governance thread.
yeah.
But it seems like the people, like what's driving the most forum signups are the people who are coming in with like emotional responses,
Yes.
perhaps, right?
Yeah. Right.
So I started thinking to myself, like, how do we get more people engaged that are actually really interested in the more scientific governance aspects rather than just like the absolutist one way or another as far as MCD and stuff like that?
I
That's
hear you.
tough.
I hear you. Like something that I've been seeing in the forums is that a lot of people that have been part of our community that see somebody like come in with like a really strong opinion that's like, you know, uh, clearly like either emotionally charged or just like not fully thought out. I think people have been super respectful in the way that they kind of like dissect it and like bring up the kind of counterpoints that the person should consider if they really do wish to hold that view. Like I haven't seen I've seen a lot of just really constructive conversation come out of like posts like that. I'm trying to like maybe think of an example, but it's kind of hard. I'm just kind of shooting from the hip from what I've seen over the last couple months. But yeah, anytime somebody comes with like a really like charged opinion, I think the overall like atmosphere in our forum in terms of like how people write is like super chill. And generally speaking, like I think the biggest uh block for people on the forum is just like the mental cognitive like attention and energy that it takes to actually read through like 20 a whole conversation of somebody like going ping ponging back and forth about a certain topic. Like it does take a lot of time, frankly, and like a lot of cognitive energy, especially if you're a person with like a full-time job, potentially even a family. It could be hard to keep up. But
Yeah.
yeah.
What's most interesting about that whole thing to me is it's not even about necessarily the governance aspect, because people who are taking the time to do what you're saying are going to vote with
Mhm.
the right mindset, right? So they're
Right.
going to make the right decisions most likely. It's more about, in this case, it's more about the opinion of the whole DeFi Ethereum community. Everybody's going to end up
Mhm.
using Dai,
Mhm.
which is like, the people engaged in governance is like 0.5% of that, right? And then the other
Oh,
99.5% is everybody else who's going to be using it. And
right.
the question is, I guess a question for you and maybe for the foundation is like how much priority is being put on public sentiment as opposed to like just governance, like scientific governance? Is there any thought being put into, if governance goes the way we think it will,
Mhm.
then the public sentiment might drop because we haven't done a good enough job of educating people about what's really happening and why they shouldn't be object to it so like vehemently.
I think this is reminding me. Yeah, I hear the question for sure. This is reminding me of something that I think you brought up in a governance and risk call, like something towards the end. I remember you saying that it was a matter of finding people who can I think this is what you said. Finding it was a matter of finding people who can effectively synthesize like a really large, complex conversation and topic into like a very digestible piece of information for the casual onlooker. So like, yeah, the 0.1% of people uh are actually the ones driving the conversation, are the ones doing the intellectual footwork to like kind of do the scientific governance and do it right, and bring arguments through fully at their in their entirety of like the granular level of the entire argument, right? But it's a matter of like how do you present like a snapshot of that argument in a way that's doesn't involve 45 minutes of reading. How do you convince somebody that your view is right against somebody else's view when the proof is kind of in the meat of the conversation, and that's like not easy. It doesn't scale. It's very hard to communicate that to like the masses, right? But then there's also like I feel the other point, which is you know is volume of participation important, or is quality of participation important, and what's like the balance there? So like obviously you want a good amount of diversity in the people engaging in governance and in these conversations, but at the same time too much becomes totally like unmanageable as well, right? Like you can't, like having way too much participation can also be like a significant bottleneck in my opinion. So it's like this weird balance. And I don't know
Yeah,
that, yeah, I got to wrap my mind around it a little more.
it's almost like, yeah, because as these people come into like the governance of the forum,
Hmm.
um it's like they have a different objective, right? It's
Hmm.
not necessarily to get educated enough to be able to vote. It's just like they want to know, like, should I keep using Dai? Or, and I almost feel like the purity Dai aspect, or the proposal for purity Dai, was almost like a knee-jerk response, it seemed like, to a lot of those arguments, where perhaps a better way to go about this is really just to try to bring consensus around one idea, and not try to just respond rapid fire to every criticism that's coming in. So I'd love to
Maybe.
find a way to help with that over the next few weeks.
Right. Yeah, maybe. The way it like see that's interesting that you saw it that way. Like the way I saw Purity Die was, I saw it as a response to like a really core criticism that like can be solved, and like you can have the both sides of the cake proverbially, right? You could have a die that's like has all the collateral types, and then you can have technically purity die. You could have a only ETH back to die. Like there's no actual limitation that's stopping you from doing it. Like it's totally doable if there's enough community and like buy-in for something like that, right?
Now, the challenge just turns into how big the market is for ETH and how much DAI you can actually create from it, because
Right.
it at some point becomes unusable if you have too many users. It's just the Ethereum ecosystem isn't sufficiently large for collateral.
For now. Now maybe, yeah, absolutely, and like those are all sort of like the second order next step conversations to be had after even establishing the idea of like purity Dai, right? Because that idea didn't exist. People were thinking, oh, there's just Dai, and like if it has any sort of centralized collateral in it, basically like it's no longer the Dai that we know, right? But yeah, just the fact that you can create purity Dai if there is enough of a market or demand around it, like that's a powerful thing to point out for a decentralized protocol like MakerDAO. But either way, yeah, take a point taken, Chris. Definitely we'll be thinking about that. We should talk more about just like communications in general, like that. Like I'm interested to hear more of your thoughts. All right, cool. Well,
Anytime.
yeah. Well, thank you guys for coming on the call today. This one was a pretty awesome one. So thank you, and we will see each other either on the 8th at an ungodly hour for me, or on the 15th in a couple of weeks. So, thank you guys, and I hope you guys have a wonderful Tuesday and rest of your weeks.
Bye.